Hey developers, today we're going to talk about 3 tips that you should know when starting Vue.js. Let's talk about it. Hey, before we start, just to let you guys know that Udemy is having another sale. You can go ahead and find all the details below. Just go ahead and click on any of those Udemy links I have below. I also put one of my favorite Vue.js courses below. You can click on that and you can learn more about Vue.js. And also my book, Vue.js in Action, I have a link below for that too, so you can check it out. So when you're starting off with Vue.js, there is a lot of things that you need to learn. It's very simple to get started, but I think as you start adding more things, it can get confusing. So my first tip when you're starting out is to just start with Vue.js without the CLI. So if you don't know, there's something called Vue CLI, and that's the command line interface utility that you can use to create Vue applications. And what it does is it uses Webpack. You can also use it for testing. It bundles everything up for you. It does a lot of things in the background that you may not understand what's happening. And it's really kind of overkill unless you are doing a little bit larger application. I would say if you're doing a very simple application or doing a demo and you're just trying to learn it, learn Vue without the CLI first, just to understand the syntax, just kind of understand how it's working together. And then when you bring in Vue CLI, you can start seeing where everything fits in together and why Vue CLI works the way it is. One big thing with Vue CLI is that you have .vue files, you have these single file components, which is really nice. Especially you'll find out when you're dealing with components later on in Vue that you have to deal with these large strings that are inside your components, which can be a problem. And there are some ways to get around it with string interpolation and things like that, but I would still recommend start with something very simple with Vue and just add in your script tags and learn it that way first. For my second tip, I would go ahead and let's take a look at this example. And I see this happening, and I've run into it a few times. You're creating a application, and you can see from here, I have this is really simple here. I have my script source. I'm just using the Vue package, the Vue script here. I have a component, which you can see here, my component. I'm using a const. Here's the string right here. Where it says div hello text. This is kind of a pain, but there are ways to get around this. And when you use single file components, you won't have to worry about it. So here's an example I was talking before. Here's string interpolation. And we have props. So if you don't know what I'm talking about here and you're brand new to Vue, go back to my last video on Vue.js components, and I explain a lot about this. But one thing I see often is that here we'll have this vbind and we're binding the text, which by the way, the shorthand for this is just colon. You don't have to always type in vbind. And you're passing in this message from parent component into message, from message into text, that is, and then the template right here, we're displaying it. So if we save it and we refresh it, we can say, yep, hello from parent component. But what sometimes people do is they forget to put this little colon here, or to put in vbind, and if you save it now, it just says hello message. So you're basically just passing a string literal into text, and you may be wondering when you're writing your components, like why nothing's working, because you have the string literal in here. So definitely be careful not to forget the colon here, so that actually gets it will bind to this text prompt. So that is my second quick tip. My final and last quick tip, and we'll go ahead and fix this. We'll put it back to vbind, and we'll save it, is that when you're dealing with data, you'll see a couple of ways this is inside your different. When you look inside the guides and different documentation, you may see it a couple of different ways. You may see the data as a colon here, and it'll be just an object. So let's say something like this, data message from parent component. And if we save it, you can see here it works fine. But other times you'll see this data as a function. And then you'll also see something like this where you'll have a return. And you can see if you refresh it, it also works. So you're probably thinking, well, what does it matter? Well, if we go back to my component up here, and let's say we add in data, and let's say we add it in as an object, and we have, let's add something called, I don't know, tester1, and we'll call it testing text. Okay, and then inside here, we'll put hello, and then we'll put in tester1, and we'll save it. So if we refresh this, you could see now there's an error at the bottom. It says the data option should be a function that returns a per instance value in component definitions. Property or method tester1 is not defined in the instance but referenced during render. So what it's telling us here is that this data object shouldn't be referenced this way. That it actually should be referenced as a function. So if we go back and put it as a function, and instead we return it, and we save it, and then we do it, now it works fine. So now we have our testing text in here. So that could be kind of confusing if you've been following along with some guides and you're not using Vue CLI, and you're thinking, well, can I just use it as an object? I can use it as an object in my Vue instance down here. That worked fine. Because like I said before, if we change it back to an instance, to an object, we don't get any errors, and it still works fine. But when we have it inside a component, it doesn't work. So that's kind of a little gotcha. So what I like to do is, no matter what, data will always be an object. Or excuse me, it'll always be a method, and it'll always return an object. So we'll go return. And that way we stay consistent between the data that's in the component and how we reference it, and data that's inside the Vue instance itself. So you just want to make sure those are both the same, and it's confusing if you do one way or another. So just keep that in mind. Now the class, there's also one other thing to keep in mind, is if you're going to have multiple versions of my component, and let's say you have, I don't know, like an object here, like a counter equals 0, and this is in the guides and a few other places. And then you're referencing the counter here. This counter will be shared by every single component that you have. So if you don't want that, of course, return a fresh object from here, just like you do through here, instead of just returning this global here. I'm not going to show you exactly that. If you want more information on that, look at the Vue.js guides. They actually have a guide exactly on that. So that's how that works. So I hope you guys found this interesting. Just 3 quick tips. Like I said before, if you're starting off, don't just jump to Vue CLI. Try to learn some basics before you jump into Vue CLI so you can kind of understand what Vue is doing first. When you're using data, use the data function, not the data object. So those are just a couple of things to get you started. And also, the last thing, let me not forget, make sure you put the colon if you're going to be passing stuff in from props. Otherwise, you just have a string literal. All right, thank you. If you like these type of videos, please click that subscribe button. If you really like it, click that bell button, and that way you'll know next time I do a video. I'll be definitely doing some more videos on Ember.js next. I just had this one on top of my head since I was writing about it. Thank you very much. Take care.